Okay, the sci-fi, fantasy, and weird fiction exploration continues with Philip Pullman's His Dark Materials. Woohoo! All right. Hey everyone, it is Shannon, and I'm excited to review my eighth title, which is actually three books for the sci-fi, fantasy, and weird adventure. And this is a fantasy trilogy called His Dark Materials, and it is the Golden Compass, sometimes known as the Northern Lights, the Subtle Knife, and the Amber Spyglass. I have this awesome three edition that I got for Christmas one year, and I just absolutely love it. They're just great. Let's put them out here. Let's put them out. Oh, one, two, three. Don't fall. Something fell, but not the books, so that's okay. Okay, so these ones actually came out between 1995 and 2000, so they might be one of the more recent titles that I have read. Although I actually did start this series in 2007 when the film for the Golden Compass came out, and then it went on long hiatus. I read the first book and part of the Subtle Knife, and then nothing else. And so when these came back out of storage, when I moved into my new place, I'm like, oh, I'm gonna read them. So here I am. I read them. These are definitely classified as fantasy. I would actually almost put them at urban fantasy, to be honest. And a lot of people I know talk about them as kids' books, or at least that they read them as kids. And they did win some children's literature awards, but I actually do not think of them as kids' books. I think some of the themes are pretty adult, not like, X-rated or something like that, but just thematically it deals with some pretty, you know, heavy theory and interesting ways to look at the world, which isn't a bad thing for kids to be reading about or anything. I don't associate it with kids books. It doesn't seem light. And so yeah, to each their own. Lots of kids read them. um so this one's really hard to do sort of like a one-line summary because it is three books. So I'm mostly going to be talking about the Golden Compass in terms of plot, and then just thematically the other two, because it would really give away things that happen in the first book if I talk about anything about the other two books. So the first book really follows Lara. She is, and this is in a sort of similar but different world, where people have demons, and that means they have, I would say, sort of like a familiar. They have an animal who is always with them and a part of them, and when they're a kid it changes formations into different kinds of animals and then settles on one particular animal, and that sort of says a lot about the person's personality. So you had me at that. Like, honestly, I don't need to know anything else. I'm like, everyone gets an animal. That's awesome. like, it's just awesome. I love it. I'm already with you. I am in this world. But there's a sort of bigger picture at play here. This big sort of conspiracy kind of going on, and Lara really goes on this big adventure to sort of get to the bottom of it. But she's actually, in a lot of ways, but she's really, working towards helping her friends, and one particular friend who goes missing. And one of the huge themes of this series, I find, at all, well, one is friendship, big time, but for me, the biggest theme of this series is bravery. The idea of going forward without knowing what you're doing, without knowing how you're going to get there, but feeling very strongly and confident in yourself that this is the right thing to do, and doing it. For me, that is what this series is about. There are lots of other themes in here. It's a fantasy setting, and there's things that are, as I said, it feels more like urban fantasy. Like there's, you know, hot air balloons, but it's kind of feels steampunky. And anyway, there's lots of different things like that. But for me, it is a fantasy, but it feels very real because it's very close to reality. Because like Laura is at Oxford in England, so that's a real place. That's not a castle somewhere. Actually, I don't know. Is Oxford a castle? It's got to be old enough that it feels castle-like, right? Right. Anyway, so what I'm trying to say is, for me, it's an unusual combination of real and fantasy, because the fantasy elements don't feel that different from what could be real. And then there's lots of things that definitely are part of this reality that the books take on. So, and that's the thing. One of the biggest things about this series that I've heard so far is really the controversy about it, because it really takes on to the head, like really directly takes on religion, but more so the church. And it talks about the Bible, and it gets really specific. And so actually it's weird, because I thought, like, in some ways I feel like this is the way that I heard about this was sort of presented as more of like, you don't have to worry about that, like this isn't going to have a religious message. But the fact that it's wrapped up in religion, or it talks so directly about religion, like it means that that's a presence. That is a presence in the book. It's a theme in the book. It's something they're talking about in the book. It's up for discussion in the book. And I really thought it would be fantasy that doesn't even exist, different world, not even have to think about it. But it is a theme in the book. So, you know, depends on where you fall, depends on where your beliefs are, depends on how open you are to having discussions about those beliefs, your comfort level with these books. I love them. I absolutely love them on so many levels, on every level. There's actually, the only thing I can think that I didn't like about these books is that I like the first book so much, and I like the second book a fair amount, and the third book a fair amount. But I love, like, for me, the first book is a 10 out of 10 all the way, and the other two are more like nines. And Amber, like 9 and 9.5. So, like, honestly, I still think I rated them all 5 on Goodreads. I might have put the Subtle Knife at 4 just to say, hey, this wasn't quite as good. But that is very specific to me. And for some of the reasons why that's the case, I can't talk about that because they're spoilery. But in a lot of reasons, like, one is the Amber Spyglass talks from a lot of different perspectives, and I gave myself too much time between the Subtle Knife and the Amber Spyglass that I couldn't remember all the characters that well, and what their goals were, and what their perspective was, and why they were doing what they were doing, and that kind of stuff. So for me, it felt a little harder, I just to understand, which I just wish I had just read them back to back to back. That would be how I'd recommend reading them, and that is, I think, how I would prefer to read them. But they're all really, really, really good. Really good. Yeah, so that was my only reservation, to be honest. And I just, there's so much to know these. They're very adventure spirited. Laura's a great character. She really just gets out there and does them, like, just does stuff, just jumps in. And it's hard to talk about more characters because there's so many books. I also really loved Serafina, who is in the film version, is played by Eva Green, and she's a witch, and I always love witches, and she's just so great. She's such a great, wonderful character, and it's really wonderful to see characters of different, like, the witch character is supposed to be like I don't know, hundreds of years old or something like that. And that's one of the things I like about this one, is that it has different types of characters going through different kinds of experiences, but when they have a similar goal, they can all come together. For me, that is the kind of fantasy I like, group of misfits trying to overcome some great obstacle. They all have their strengths and weaknesses. We all get to, like, cheer on their strengths and just be with them during their weaknesses, and they all strive towards the goal. Like, for me, that's like everything I like about fantasy is just all of that. So for this one, it does feel a bit more real. It's a bit more anchored in the real world, because of, she's in London, or in Oxford, England, and, like, these places exist. And they talk about other places, and it's got this weird sort of, I don't love it when urban fantasy or alternate fiction does this, alternate histories do this, is they're similar but different names. It just doesn't work for me, but that's very minor. Like, I recognize that is just something that happens in those types of, whether it's speculative fiction or urban fantasy or alternate realities. It's something people do. Or steampunk. I don't dig it. But that's okay. I can live with it. I'm trying to think if there's anything else. Will I read more from this author? Yeah, but I don't think he has. He has, like, a companion to this, and I don't know how many other books that he has. I would say that this is definitely an essential series. And if you're interested in fantasy, it's well worth reading. I know that it's not going to be everyone's bag because of some of the themes in it, but I definitely think it holds an important place. It has, I love the film Golden Compass. I do. I know not a lot of people do, but I do. It also is apparently going to be adapted into a TV series, which I think is a better format for it because it's so long and there's so many characters. So I think that's really exciting. And before I go into spoilers, what I'm going to review next, I'm not quite sure. I am reading The Moon is a Harsh Mistress and A Game of Thrones, so I guess it depends on what I finish next. And I got to get my next weird in. I think it might be the first in the Barsoom. But I haven't even started that yet, so I'm open to suggestions. Let me know, people, if there's any weird titles that you'd like me to check out, and I will see what I can do. Now, just a very few spoiler zone things. What? Oh, I really love the ending of the series. It was a really brave choice, and that's actually not even super, well, it is spoilery. But I just think it was a really, really brave choice where they went with this. I don't actually want to talk specifics on that. But I also really love that Will and Laura they just sort of really saw each other. It was such a powerful moment for them to really, after all this, be like, yeah, and then where the series goes from there, it's like, wow, oh my god, I probably cried. I can't remember, but I bet I have a feeling I was crying by the end of this book. Wow, yeah. And my only reservation, my only like annoyance was not reading the third book quite so soon, and I couldn't, I had a hard time visualizing the characters that had seed pod, that had used the seed pod for travel. Like, were they trees? Did they have fingernails like branches? I had a hard time. That whole community, I had a hard time visualizing it. Physically, no. Like geographically, no. But the actual entities, beings, humans, and I love that idea of that they weren't human but were human. Like that they're beings and we're all beings and we can all be different and that's okay, you know? I think it really embraces that, and that was really nice. That was a really nice theme to see. And yeah, loved it. Loved it. So good. All right. Thank you so much for watching.